I think it should be obvious at this point that the British government doesn't want Brexit. I think anyone saying that they do is delusional. I think it's fair to say that they're getting ready to betray Brexit. And I've written a short little list of talking points to discuss of how they might try and delay Brexit or prevent Brexit. Number one, they're of course going to try and delay Brexit, as I just said. Now, delaying Brexit allows them the opportunity to create a government that is disliked by the people and to push off Brexit as far as they can in order to then swoop in and bring in Jeremy Corbyn or someone else to then cut out Brexit completely. If they delay Brexit just enough, then they can put in a leftist government to just throw Brexit out the window. So any delay of Brexit is a betrayal of Brexit in its purest form. The second point is a partial Brexit. That's another thing that they're obviously moving to, is they don't want a full Brexit. They don't want a clean Brexit. They just want, oh, well, maybe we're going to have the borders open a little bit. Yeah, okay, we're still going to have full, complete, Schengen zone type rules. And, yeah, all that trade stuff, doesn't really matter. As long as we're not in the EU in name, everything will be fine. So that's what they're trying to move to now, is this pseudo we're in but we're out kind of thing. And, a partial Brexit's better than no Brexit, but a partial Brexit would mean that at any moment they could just, like I said before, betray Brexit and then go back. So you have a partial Brexit under Theresa May, and then people are pissed off at Theresa May and they're saying, oh, screw Theresa May. And then they vote for a bunch of third-party candidates and stuff. And then Jeremy Corbyn wins by default. This is the problem that England is in. The only viable party in England is, of course, UKIP, because everything else is full of crap. If you go any further right than UKIP, you can bet your bottom dollar that those are controlled by MI5. I remember back in the day they had a great party. I'm not going to say the name of it because I don't want to cause all kinds of controversy, but I'm sure many people know the story. I mean, I remember watching a phenomenal man be in charge of a great party, and then he was ousted out of his party by what looks like MI5 agents, and they just drove the party into the ground, and they're a bunch of lunatics now. And then there's other parties that have popped up in response to that too, all in an attempt to cut out the vote from Brexit, or to cut out the vote from UKIP, to be specific. And essentially don't vote for anything further right than UKIP, because number one, they're not going to win. Number two, Brexit is the most important thing, and UKIP's the one that's going to get it done. Now, UKIP has had a few candidates run in their more recent, I guess, a few months ago, their leadership races, where there's been a couple questionable people running, and some of them lost, and those people, or one of them that lost, decided she was going to go create her own party. Now, that should raise suspicion of the least. And she picked quite a peculiar name for her party. What a peculiar name. It's very interesting that she picked that name. And that's going to be very relevant in the future. Most of you are not going to understand the importance of that, but it will be relevant. Someone's going to get famous, and the whole psyop to destroy Brexit will just come flowing out of the water. There are bigger things at play here. The President of the United States is not going to allow Brexit to just not happen. So there you go. So number three is destroying and dismantling, and this is what they want to do. MI5 and, of course, Hope Not Hate and many of these other groups, Searchlight Magazine I think is one of them, they're going to try and dismantle UKIP and break it up. As I explained, it seems as though maybe some of the candidates for UKIP, or at least specifically one of them, is either not tuned to the British people, or potentially just an MI5 agent trying to sabotage everything going on. And any split from UKIP is not a good idea. Everyone needs to remain united behind UKIP. And there's been problems with the guy who won the leadership race because of the scandal of him sleeping with some woman other than his wife and stuff. And I don't know what that's about. Maybe it's some some honeypot thing where they inserted some woman into his life and all that stuff. I don't really know. Maybe it's just some guy fooling around. I don't know what it is. But yeah, so there's been problems, and which brings me to the next thing. The only way to save UKIP is by putting Nigel Farage back in charge. And anyone who knows anything about anything knows that Nigel Farage, or at least the rumor has it, after he had his plane crash several years ago, and he survived miraculously from that plane crash, the rumor is that he made a deal where he would leave politics once Brexit was accomplished. So after the Brexit vote, he allowed other people to take charge of the party, but he still hasn't left the European Union Parliament because he wants to see Brexit go through. And what I would say about that is Nigel Farage needs to just take back charge of UKIP and be the absolute indefinite, forever leader of UKIP. Nigel Farage is in a position where he can become the Prime Minister of Britain in the next election easily. Literally easily. 17 million people voted for Brexit. That's 17 million votes for UKIP if Nigel Farage runs as the leader. It's really as simple as that. If anyone else is in charge and people are going to be like, oh, well, I don't know, it's not Nigel, it's not... People like Nigel. And therefore, Nigel needs to take charge. I understand there are issues, and Nigel is probably being threatened to not take charge of UKIP. What I'd say to that is Nigel is friends with the President of the United States of America, a man who at any moment can pick up a phone and do anything he wants. So if Nigel Farage is being threatened by MI5 or the British government or whoever, then Nigel Farage needs only to pick up his own phone and call the President of the United States and say, I need my own security team, I need my own protection, and look into anyone who's threatened me, and what about those sealed indictments? Yeah, thank you. That's all he needs to say. That's all he needs to do. The next point is they're beginning to imprison dissidents in England. You can't betray Brexit until you've thrown everyone in jail who's going to kick and scream about Brexit, and rightfully so. It's right to be angry that they're betraying Brexit, but they can't do it until they have all the big figures in prison. And, people can, come up with all the theories they want, but that's just the fact. They're imprisoning people because of Brexit. They make up all these big excuses. Well, it's because of this, it's because of that. Focus on the big picture. It's obvious. They're throwing people in prison because they need to get ready to get rid of Brexit. Okay? And that's what you need to understand, and the people who are behind this... Let's just say the President of the United States supported Brexit, and the President of the United States is not going to be too, let's just put it this way, happy if the British government decides to betray it, especially from a British government that has been snubbing him. So, I don't know, but I think that the leaders of Europe are really not as smart as what they think they are. And the fifth point is they're eventually just, and I'm not even kidding when I say this, but they will eventually just criticize the topic of, or criminalize the topic of Brexit. Now, they're never going to make it criminal to be necessarily in favor of Brexit, or at least I don't think so. But what they will do is, if someone says, oh, well, I support Brexit. Okay, they haven't committed a crime. But the moment they say, well, why do you support, or someone asks them, well, why do you support Brexit? Well, I support it because of this, because of immigration, because of, trade deals, because of that, and then, that's a hate crime. So they're not going to criminalize being in favor of Brexit, but what they will do is they'll criminalize the reasons for why people are in favor of Brexit. And that's the last step, is they can't betray Brexit until it becomes illegal to support it. And they'll never get away with making it illegal to directly support Brexit, but they can play with the rules of, hate speech and stuff, and counterterrorism, even though the only terrorists are the people who work in the British government, but that's, everyone knows that, of course. But the point is, I'll focus on that point for a second. If the British government is letting in returning ISIS fighters into Britain, whose side is the British government on? Exactly. Think about that one. Where does ISIS get their funding from? Oh, there's several countries that give ISIS funding. Think about that one. And so the point is they're going to use all these legislation pieces to try and go after Brexiteers. And the only solution to that is, of course, Nigel Farage taking back charge of UKIP and leading UKIP to victory. And if they rig an election against Nigel Farage, Nigel Farage is friends with Trump. So it's really as simple as that.